Kopanang Africa Against Xenophobia's legal action against Operation Dudula kicked off on Tuesday, with the applicants laying their arguments bare before the High Court judge in Johannesburg.
Operation Dudula has followed a common modus operandi. It begins with, and we set this out in paragraph 28 of our Headsman Order, it begins with inciting hatred on public platforms, either gatherings or on social media, blaming foreigners for all sorts of social ills. It then convenes gatherings, if it hasn't already done so, which ratchet up that conduct and are aimed at threatening and harassing foreign nationals. And what follows, my lord, is all of the conduct that I've then highlighted: chasing people away from hospitals, threatening schools, evicting people or threatening their eviction, removing traders from stalls or threatening to do so, threatening shops, and further acts of violence, intimidation, harassment.
One of the local human rights groups, Section 27, detailed the allegations against Operation Dudula.
Operation Dudula violated migrant persons' rights, particularly the right to health care and the right to education. That's evident from the papers, and a declaration must be made by this court to that effect. The focus in this regard, my lord, is to the right to healthcare and the right of access to education. Pardon me, the right of access to healthcare services and the right to education. And the reason for that is because those are the programmatic areas within which Section 27 operates. But this is not to say, my lord, that these are the only rights that have been violated by Operation Dudula. The founding affidavit has a plethora of violations of human rights by Operation Dudula.
The matter has also attracted international human rights organizations. The International Commission of Jurists says South Africa has international obligations on human rights matters. They argued that the government has not lived up to its own commitments.
This court ought to find that, in line with the submissions, the state has failed in its international law obligations and its constitutional obligations as it pertains to protecting the rights of non-citizens or preventing the discrimination on the basis of status and origin.
South African government departments will make their representations and legal arguments on Wednesday. Operation Dudula was not represented in court and will not be participating in the litigation process. The movement said it will announce its next step on Wednesday. For Newsroom Africa on Channel 405, I'm Ziniko Mhlaba in Johannesburg.
The establishment of the Border Management Authority, BMA, aims to address these issues. While the BMA has reported successes in apprehending individuals attempting to enter illegally and intercepting fraudulent documents, the sheer scale of the challenge remains immense. It's important to acknowledge that managing long and diverse borders is a monumental undertaking for any nation, and South Africa's historical interconnectedness within Southern Africa adds another layer of complexity. It is within this context of perceived government inaction and overwhelmed public services that movements like Operation Dudula emerged. Many argue that had the government effectively managed its borders and regulated immigration, such organizations would. A central and pervasive concern for many South Africans is the perceived failure of government to effectively control the country's borders. This widely held belief is often cited as a primary catalyst for the substantial influx of undocumented immigrants. South Africa shares extensive, often porous, land borders with several neighboring nations, making effective monitoring a formidable task. Reports of deteriorating border infrastructure, such as broken fences, and allegations of corruption at official entry points further exacerbate the problem. These factors, alongside sophisticated smuggling networks, facilitate irregular crossings into the country. Not have gained traction. While Operation Dudula's tactics, which have often involved direct confrontation and the forceful removal of foreign nationals, are highly questionable and have drawn widespread condemnation for their xenophobic undertones, their stated objective was to prioritize South Africans. This sentiment resonates with a segment of the population that feels neglected and believes that foreign nationals are taking opportunities and resources away from citizens. Adding to the frustration is a deeply held belief among many South Africans that the justice system demonstrates a contradictory responsiveness. There is a palpable sense of grievance that the legal system often takes swift and decisive action to protect the rights of foreign nationals, even undocumented ones, with court interdicts and legal challenges frequently halting operations perceived to be targeting foreigners. In stark contrast, numerous cases involving South African citizens, from serious crimes like gender-based violence and murder to everyday matters, are perceived to either go cold, see dockets wind up missing, or face inexplicable delays. This creates a perception of an imbalanced justice system, further fueling the frustration and a sense that South African lives and grievances are not being prioritized. A significant point of contention revolves around the strain that the growing population, particularly undocumented immigrants, places on South Africa's already overstretched public services. Concerns are frequently raised about the impact on healthcare. Public hospitals and clinics in South Africa often face severe resource constraints, including shortages of medicine, beds, and staff. The argument is made that undocumented individuals access these services without contributing to the tax base, further exacerbating the existing pressure. While international and national human rights frameworks often dictate that basic emergency medical care should be provided regardless of status, the sheer volume can be overwhelming for a system already struggling to meet the needs of its own citizens. Education, similarly, the enrollment of children of undocumented immigrants in public schools, while aligned with the constitutional right to basic education for all children in South Africa, is viewed by some as an additional burden on limited educational resources, leading to overcrowded classrooms and stretched facilities, particularly in underserved communities. Employment and social services, the perception that undocumented immigrants compete for scarce jobs, particularly in low-skilled sectors, is a pervasive concern. There are also anxieties about access to social grants and housing, with some believing that undocumented individuals may fraudulently access these benefits intended for South African citizens. It's crucial to acknowledge that South Africa faces immense internal socio-economic challenges, including high unemployment, poverty, and inequality, which predate the current scale of immigration. Attributing all these challenges solely to the presence of undocumented immigrants risks oversimplifying complex systemic issues and diverting attention from domestic policy failures or structural problems. Studies have shown mixed effects of immigration on the labor market, with some indicating that immigrants often fill niches, are more entrepreneurial, and can even create jobs for locals, while others point to competition in specific sectors. A frequently cited point of frustration among some South Africans is the perceived double standard in how immigration is viewed. The argument is made that if the Zimbabwean government, for instance, arrests and deports undocumented South African immigrants, it is seen as a legitimate exercise of sovereign power. However, when South Africa takes similar actions, it is often met with accusations of xenophobia. This highlights a deep-seated tension. On one hand, every sovereign nation has the right and responsibility to manage its borders and enforce its immigration laws. On the other hand, South Africa's history, its constitutional commitment to human rights, and its role as a regional leader in the Southern African Development Community, SADC, mean that its actions are often scrutinized through a lens of human rights and regional cooperation. The concept of non-refoulement, the principle that individuals should not be returned to a country where they would face persecution or serious harm, is also a significant factor in international refugee law, to which South Africa is a signatory. The term xenophobia itself describes the intense dislike or fear of people from other countries. While legitimate concerns about immigration management exist, the line is crossed when these concerns manifest as discrimination, harassment, or violence against foreign nationals based on their nationality or origin, rather than their individual actions or legal status. The documented instances of xenophobic violence and attacks against foreign nationals in South Africa, often targeting other African migrants, are a deeply troubling aspect of this complex issue, damaging the nation's international reputation and undermining its democratic values. It's undeniable that many South African citizens grapple with severe socio-economic challenges. Communities facing high unemployment, poverty, and inadequate public services often feel the brunt of these issues most acutely. In such environments, the presence of foreign nationals, particularly those perceived as undocumented or competing for scarce resources, can become a focal point for frustration and anger. The South Africa First sentiment, while understandable in its desire to prioritize citizens' well-being, can, if not carefully managed, devolve into exclusionary and discriminatory practices. The legitimate frustrations of citizens regarding their own economic struggles and the pressures on public services need to be acknowledged and addressed through effective governance, economic development, and robust social welfare programs. Addressing the complex issues surrounding immigration in South Africa requires a multi-pronged approach that moves beyond simplistic narratives and divisive rhetoric. Strengthening border management, effective, humane, and corruption-free border control is essential for national security and orderly migration. This includes investing in infrastructure, technology, and well-trained personnel, as well as fostering regional cooperation to address root causes of irregular migration. Reviewing and enforcing immigration policy. South Africa's immigration laws need to be clear, consistently enforced, and adaptable to changing circumstances. This includes efficient processing of legitimate applications for visas and permits, as well as fair and transparent procedures for dealing with undocumented individuals, including deportation where appropriate and legal. Addressing domestic socio-economic challenges, the core issues of poverty, unemployment, and inequality among South Africans must be tackled through inclusive economic policies, job creation initiatives, and improvements in public service delivery. This will alleviate the perception that immigrants are solely responsible for these challenges. Ensuring equitable justice system functionality, critically, there is an urgent need to ensure that the justice system operates with equal efficiency and responsiveness for all residents, addressing the perception that cases involving South Africans are deprioritized. This requires investigating and resolving issues of missing dockets and delayed prosecutions to restore public trust. Promoting social cohesion and combating xenophobia, education and public discourse play a vital role in fostering understanding and challenging stereotypes. Leaders, civil society, and communities must actively promote social cohesion and reject all forms of discrimination and violence against foreign nationals, recognizing their diverse contributions to South African society and economy. Regional cooperation. South Africa cannot address migration challenges in isolation. Collaborative efforts with SADC countries to address the drivers of migration, facilitate legal movement, and manage borders collectively are crucial for long-term stability and development in the region.